you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, since 1972, in fact, ever since 1972, since the wages and salary special increase bill was enacted, it has become an annual feature for the government to come forward with a bill for additional remuneration in order to compensate the wage earners for the loss of their purchasing power due to the rate of inflation. I've listened carefully to the Honorable Minister. He said that in that law we make provision to punish those in the private sectors who refuse to pay the salary compensation. In fact, it's unfortunate that 72 to 2018 is more than 30, 36, 35 years after, we still have some members in the private sector who refuse to pay the compensation. It's good to read why that bill was introduced in 1972. And I quote the then Minister of Labour, Dr. B. Garbaran, when he introduced the bill. Generally speaking, I quote, generally speaking, the response of private employers to the government appeal has not been positive. And accordingly, it has become necessary for government to enact legislation with a view to compelling private firms to pay the 12% increase to their employees. That was in 1972. And unfortunately, I still hear today the Ministry of Labour, so many years after, we still have in the private sector certain employers who still refuse to pay the compensation. Like rightly pointed out by the Honourable Minister, every year there is, at the end of each year, a tripartite meeting where the representatives of employers, trade unions, and government are present to discuss annual compensation. Traditionally, the trade unions will make their proposal. The private sectors will express their fears with regards to their ability to pay. And finally, it will be for government to conclude the final amount, which amount would be accepted by the parties, but most often by the union and the protests. So the main question one asks every year, does the annual wage compensation really compensate workers for their loss of purchasing power? This is the annual question which is asked every year. Madam Speaker, according to the CSO, the rate of inflation this year is 3.3%. However, there is always disagreement between the private sector, i.e. the employers, and the trade unions on the true cost and the true rise in the cost of living in real life. On the union side, the main arguments are the statistics Mauritius does not reflect, and most especially the way the CPI is calculated does not reflect what is happening in real life. The more so that the panier ménagère, which is used by the statistics Mauritius for the calculation of inflation rate, is far from the reality of real life. Consumption pattern change, Madam Speaker. Commodities, price of commodities change. What was a luxury before is a necessity today. I take just two examples. The van d'école today is a necessity for all the families. It's not in the basket. Bottled water. Most of us now, especially when we have children, we give them bottled water to take to school because there is no good drinking water, safe drinking water at school. And this again, just a simple example. But they are what was luxuries 2 years before, today, for 2 or 3 years, is a necessity today. And this is why there is that issue whether the rate of inflation as calculated by the statistics office really reflect what's happening in real life. There is also the question of rattrapage. And now with the question of minimum wage, we have that issue of relativity, which I will come later. The issue of relativity in both the private and the public sector. And for the union, of course, it is an occasion to fight inequalities in general, most especially in the private sector, and particularly in the zone France, an issue which will come later when we come to the workers of the zone France. However, on the side of the employers, there are always that argument that compensation should not only take into account the rate of inflation, but also productivity. But when it comes to productivity, we know the problems the workers face when it comes to payment on piece rate, where minimum wages, unfortunately, does not reflect the real productivity. Madam Speaker, one issue which has been of great concern for the union and which allows the employers to make an abuse of the confusion in the definition is the definition of basic wages. In the bill before us today, under Section 2 of the bill, basic wage or salary, A means one, I don't want to read it, it's long, one, let's explain what is basic wage. Two, in relation to employer or the employee of an export enterprise. Three, in relation to an employee of an export enterprise whose basic wages or salaries per hourly which blah, blah, blah. Four, in relation to an employee in respect of whom no wages or salaries per hour under the remuneration regulation. Five, in every other case and subject to the payment of national minimum wage under the National Minimum Wage Regulation 2017. We have 5 sections, 5 paragraphs of more than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines, 5 paragraphs of 5, 6 lines to explain basic wage. And this gives an opportunity for employers to make an abuse of the definition and does not respect the minimum wage as prescribed by the law. Why don't we have a simple definition like we have in the Employment Rights Act? Let's have in the labor market only one definition for salary and wages in the Employment Relation Act. It's simply defined in one paragraph. Base wage or salary in relation to a worker means where the terms and conditions of employment of the worker are governed by remuneration regulation, arbitral award or an agreement, whether oral or written, express or implied, the basic wage or salary prescribed in the remuneration regulations, award or agreement, or whether employer pays a higher wage or salary, the higher wage or salary so paid, but does not include an allowance by any name called, and whenever paid in cash or in kind. Simple definition. Clear definition of basic wage and salary. But why is it every year in the annual additional remuneration we have such a complicated definition? And like I say, the employer who are more equipped to take professional, to hire the services of professional, take advantage of this definition in order to do away with salary compensation, additional salary compensation, and often with minimum wage. So I will invite the Honourable Minister, probably not this time, but look again at the issue of definition of salary, basic wage, or salary. Let's have a common definition for all the laws regarding industrial relation. In all our labor law, when it comes to work, compensation, and salary. So, in order not to create confusion, thus giving employers an excuse not to pay the minimum wage or the additional wage, I believe it is imperative that the definition of basic wage or salary of the Employment Rights Act replace the complicated definition found in the Additional Remuneration Act. Now we have the national minimum wage. Since 2018, all workers, with the exception of those working in an export-oriented enterprise, is entitled to the national minimum wage of 8,140 rupees over and above the wage compensation of 360 rupees, which was granted last year, making it a total sum of 8,500 plus the negative income tax of 500 rupees from the MOA, bringing the monthly income to 9,000 rupees. I would like to ask the Honourable Minister, since the minimum wage does not apply to someone who works less than 20 hours a week, how many cases there have been where full-time employers, full-time workers, has been converted into part-time workers by their employer in order to do away with minimum wage? That's not only penalizing those now working less than 20, and they don't benefit from the MOA negative 500 rupees compensation. And I know as a fact there are many cases where full-time staff has been turned into part-time staff in order to do away, doing more or less the same job. Telling them you don't have to come 5 days a week now, come 3 days a week. But the garden remains the same size. The number of rooms in the house to be cleaned remain the same size. But the job is being done in less than 20 hours, then depriving the workers of that minimum wage. So with the bill today, if I understand the Honourable Minister rightly, they will have 8,900 from the employers and 500 from the MOA, making a total of 9,400 rupees. And then the regulation will be reviewed, extended for the next year. But what does that mean, Madam Speaker? The minimum wage remains 8,140. So the minimum wage will remain 8,140, as it does not take into account wage compensation. It does not take into account the wage compensation of last year. It does not take into account the wage compensation of this year. So it will remain the minimum wage. And when we voted the law for the minimum wage council, the council is supposed to review it every 5 years. So every 5 years, so it means that the 8,140 rupees remain with us for 5 years. And this becomes more complicated, and where it hurts most the workers, when we talk about the zone France. Are you aware, Madam Speaker, that is in the zone France, overtime is being calculated and will continue to be calculated on a basic rate of 5,600 rupees per month? It's a fact. I'm sure the Honourable Minister is aware. So in the zone first, whenever you do overtime, there is no question of minimum wage, there is no question of additional compensation. The overtime is being based on the basic sum of 5,600 rupees per month. And God knows how many overtimes there are in the free zone. So this is an issue which of course I will invite the Honourable Minister to look into and to come to a solution. People in the zone France are suffering. Although we say we have a minimum wage, but they are not having a minimum wage, especially when their overtime is even calculated on the sum of 5,600 rupees. Now let us address the issue of relativity. When the Honourable Minister was concluding the debate on the National Wage Consultative Council Bill in May 2016, that's 2 years ago, more than 2 years ago, the Honourable Minister had this to say on relativity. I quote, "Madam Speaker, it is obvious that the introduction of the national minimum wage will cause relative distortion for some grades in both the private and the public sector. For example, a worker reckoning lesser length of service may be drawing the same or higher wages than a worker in the same grade with longer length of service." End of. It's a fact. With the introduction of minimum wage, there is that issue of relativity. But where are we today with regard to the issue of relativity, more than 2.5 years later, there has been no progress at all on the issue of relativity, and this is causing tremendous prejudice to thousands of workers, both in the private and public sector. According to my information, the NRB has already submitted its recommendation to the ministry months ago, but up to today, no action has been taken. And I hope the Honourable Minister, when summing up, will give us some more detail where matters stand with regard to that report of the NRB. Further, with regard to the PRB, although the union has been asking for an interim urgent report with regard to relativity, nothing has come forward. But we do hope whenever the NRB and the PRB recommendation will be put into practice, it must and it should have retrospective effect. The workers cannot pay the price of the delay with regard to these institutions or with regard to the ministry decision, the ministry delay in taking decision. It has to have retrospective effect as from the day when the minimum wages come into operation. Now, talking about salary compensation, what about the remuneration orders? I'm made to understand that following the introduction of minimum wage, there are only 14 remuneration orders which has been revisited since 2016. And this only with regards to salary, and it has not, up to now they are still waiting their recommendation with regard to the condition of service, which has not been reviewed. 14 has been reviewed only with regard to salary, but not with regard to the condition of service. There are at least 5 remuneration orders where submission has been completed for more than a year now, and still no publication of the new remuneration orders. And the 5 main one is the most probably au bas de l'échelle, where there is more abuse. We have heard many times in this house about these workers, those in the construction industry. Remuneration, no new remuneration orders. In the security guards, God knows the urgency with regard to the security guards. We know how many abuse there are. Those who are in the Public Account Committee knows. Whenever we meet, we effected site visit. People over 75, 18 years are being employed on a meaner salary of 5,000 to 600 rupees. And when they call this company for submission, they charge 13 to 1,400,000 rupees per watchman. I'm sure all of us must have seen, be it at the government school, be it at the dispensaire, the age of these people, the abuse they are with regard to security guards. And they are still waiting for their remuneration orders. The childcare sector, an important sector, is still no remuneration orders. Those working in pre-primary schools, there was those who were earning only 1,500 rupees. The government took a decision to regularize the salary. But what about the other condition of work? Up to today, there is no remuneration orders for these workers. We just voted a bill on a special education needs school. The submission has been done more than a year at the NRB. Still no remuneration orders. So I think there is time, it's an urgent need now. If you want to move forward, if you want that every people are on the back wagon of having a better life, benefit from a better condition of work, that we review the NRB. I'm not saying that, I'm not blaming those at the NRB. Probably they are understaffed. Probably they don't have sufficient experts. So it is not correct to have submission made more than 2 years, and still we don't have the publication of the NRB. So I invite the Honourable Minister to look into the matter again. We are talking about condition of work again. The PRB report, 2016, stated clearly that police officers, prison officers, fire brigade officers have to be paid a performance bonus every year. Why is it that since 2016, these officers have not been paid any performance bonus? Why is the government himself is not complying with the recommendation of the PRB? Since 2016, they should have been paid a yearly performance bonus. Nothing has been paid to the prison officers, fire service officers, and police officers. Why? I hope the Honorable Minister, in his summing up, will give us a reason, because the officers, 13,000 police officers, I don't know how many prison officers, they are all waiting since 2016 for their performance allowance. The Honorable Minister of Health is not here. Why is it that attendants working at the G2 hospital hasn't been paid their overtime for the last 16 months? Only those working at G2 hospital. I just confirm him, Honorable Gayani, is doing like that? No, I don't know whether you are saying yes or no, because for 16 months they have not been paid. I've just confirmed it with one attendant before coming here at noon. G2 hospital overtime and their extra allowance when they work on public holidays has not been paid for 16 months. The unions have been after, I don't know, it's happened only in G2 hospital. And according to my information, at Victoria Hospital, at Sasiu Sagar Ramgulam Hospital in the north, they are paying. But only G2 hospital, they are not paying. Honorable Hessu is not here. So we are having, there are some salaries, compensations, good. We have to ensure that each and everybody benefit from it. We have to ensure that the institution respect, especially government itself, should set the example by respecting the recommendation of the PRB with regard to the performance allowance to these officers. Madam Speaker, let me conclude by making an appeal to government through the Honourable Minister in the public sector, and most especially in this co-paritatic, where there are political appointees, parastitical bodies, certain boards, where there are political appointees, trade unionists, officials of trade unions are constantly being harassed and unfairly penalized. I have in mind, Madam Speaker, the police officers union. We all know how the president is constantly being harassed. 2 days ago, he had to make a complaint at the CID. The prison officers union. Can you imagine, be it at the police and the prison officers? At no time since the creation of the police officers union, and with this commissioner of prison, they have never sit on the same table to talk about industrial relation, about the fate of the workers. Mr. Nobin and the one in the prison, what's his name?
This is another matter.
Mr. Apadou.
This is another matter.
No, but it has to do with industrial wages. The Honourable Minister, when he concluded, he thanks all the unions for collaborating with regard to the minimum wage. Yes, it's not another matter. But we have to give the union their job. They have to be able to function in the post office, the irrigation authority, the casinos. We all know what the situation is with regard to industrial relation. So may I appeal to the Honourable Minister, to government, to see to it that in all the institutions at least, we have to encourage trade unions. We have to give them their due care and attention for them to function and to judge, so that we can benefit from their experience when it comes to tripartite meeting. I have done, Madam Speaker. Thank you.